Intro chat with Merrill's live, digging deep where techs thrive. From the latest hacks to cool updates, join the ride, don't be late.
Hey, hi folks. Welcome to yet another episode of Intro Chat. And today I have a master storyteller joining us. He is the well-known Tony Redmond. Even if you don't know him, I'm 100% sure you've come across his articles. You must have Googled on something to do with M365. And I'm 100% sure any one of you would have stumbled across his many writings. He's a prolific writer. He publishes the book Office 365 for IT pros, and I'm really keen on learning how you do it because that's a massive thing you do with M365 and keeping that book up to date on all things M365. So without further ado, I'll let Tony introduce himself. And Tony, where are you right now? Which part of the world are you joining us from?
Right now, I'm on the far western coast of Ireland in a place called Derrygimla, which the next place as you go west is Boston.
Cool! Wow,
yeah,
amazing. I wish one day to
visit. Thank you for telling people that they have to stumble across the internet to find my articles. I mean, that's really nice. It's not like they do go out and do a search or anything like that. They're stumbling around in the darkness and they find these random articles. I mean, that's just, I'm really impressed by that. Anyway, it's nice to be with you.
Yes, it is. I mean, that's how I came to know you. Like I always find some trouble and then I Google it and I'm like, who is this Tony person? He knows so much about M365. And if I have a problem, I know you have the answer to, what it is and the history behind the problem as well.
Let me correct you straight off. I'm not sure if I have the answers. I think I look for a lot of information. I find a lot of information. I communicate a lot of information, but there is so much I don't know. And I'm in awe with respect to some of the people that really do know their stuff. You can see them in the various communities. They may not communicate as much as I do, but they are much more technical. So I'm in awe of their knowledge, I'm in awe of their expertise, and so on.
Always being humble, Tony.
No, I mean, the thing is, as you get older in this world, you realize your capacity and your capabilities. And I think it's really important to recognize that there are a lot of people out there who know a lot more than you do. And every day is an opportunity to learn, which is, I guess, what we've been trying to do with things like the Office 365 for IT Pros book and all of the articles that support it and whatever. I mean, we're just learning. But there's no point in just learning for yourself. You got to share the information. And
absolutely.
That's what we try and do.
That's what I started with EntraChat as well, to, bring on folks like you who have built a wealth of knowledge. So tell us about yourself. Your career is very interesting, and what you're doing now is really interesting too. So tell us like what you do and what drives you.
My career isn't, I don't know. I worked in large companies and watched takeovers happen. So that's how I worked in digital, Compaq and HP. Ended up as a vice president and chief technology officer in HP. Then got very, being an executive isn't all as great as it seems like, So I attended a bunch of con calls and whatever. I mean, I had a great time at HP, and a great time at Compaq, great time at Digital, worked with some incredible people. But at the end of the day, constant con calls got on my nerves. So I got out and I decided to do something different. And I got to say that looking back at those corporate times, I mean, I had great opportunities. At one stage I was the corporate sponsor at HP for Microsoft, which sounds great, because I mean we had a business with Microsoft, so We supplied a lot of hardware to Microsoft specifically. So becoming the corporate sponsor, you say, "Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah.
I'll have that." And at times it does. I mean, I ended up, for example, sitting down with Bill Gates at the launch of SharePoint 2007 in San Francisco.
Wow. Nice.
But it also means you get out of bed at night when things like a SAN goes bad. And Exchange 2003 was a bit of a pig. I mean, looking back at it, I think the fact that Exchange 2003 was such a pig when it came to I/O was a major forcing factor for Microsoft to say, "Hey, we got to do something about this and get off these expensive SANs and whatever, and drive down the cost of disk." And I think if Microsoft hadn't done that, then it wouldn't have laid the foundation for the low-cost disk framework that exists today inside Exchange Online and the other, SharePoint Online with Azure SQL and all the rest of it. So it's weird looking back at some of those situations. I'm wondering, wow, how did this turn out? I remember too, the first briefings the HP executive team got from Microsoft about what became Azure. And we were looking at it, and this is like about 2005, maybe 2004, 2005.
Yes.
Looking at it and saying, "What the hell? What are these guys doing? They must be on magic mushrooms or something like that." But you look back, boy, we were really wrong.
But at the time, it was really small too, as well, right? Like it was just
But maybe I've got to say, maybe the magic mushrooms also worked. I don't know. You gotta. We lived through some interesting times. I remember things like the U.S. Senate project with Active Directory. This is an Entra chat, so we should talk about Active Directory and Entra and all the rest of it. U.S. Senate project in 2000 was one of the first big Active Directory decentralized projects that were ever done. Nobody knew anything about Active Directory at this stage, by the way. We were still dealing with some beta software or whatever. But anyway, we decided that every U.S. senator would have their own domain, all within one big forest.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was crazy stuff. I mean, each of the Senate offices had 2 Exchange servers. That was in the Senate office in Washington, and then they had another 2 Exchange servers in their home office wherever, Montana or Hawaii or whatever. And they were all in these.
That is a fascinating story.
They were all in these domains, but of course, like the whole thing just didn't work, and we didn't understand the security well enough. Well, Microsoft didn't understand the security either. But
and this is 2001, right? Just to
this is 2000. This is like June 2000.
2000, yeah. Okay.
The only reason I understand that, I know that is the only time in the world that a customer got me to fly Concorde across the Atlantic to go and have my ass chewed out. Big time for why a project wasn't working. Anyway, so after all those corporate triumphs, and you notice like all of the stuff I'm telling you about have been bad things, SANs going west and not understanding Azure when we were told about it, and Active Directory screwing up. So this is not a golden list of triumphs I'm telling you about. I'm not telling you I was the greatest corporate executive in the world, but anyway, I had a great team working for me, and they got me out of trouble most of the time. So anyway, I decided that in 2010 to just become independent, and since then I've had a very happy time just doing my own stuff.
Nice. So how did you get started on your book? So you have this book for all of N365 admin. How did that story come about?
Well, I've written lots of books in the past. So, I mean, go back to All-in-One, which was a digital equipment corporation office system, ran on VAX VMS. So I started off with to think a book called All-in-One, The Technical Odyssey, or A Technical Odyssey. This is 92, 91, thereabout. When Exchange came along, Digital and Microsoft did a thing called I was working on a VAX VMS, or an NT-based mail server at the time.
Okay.
from digital. But then Bill Gates and Bob Palmer made a big deal called the Alliance for Enterprise Computing, and that was the end of that mail server, and we had to do Exchange instead. Right. So if there's one way to find out about software, is to write about it. So I wrote my first Exchange book called Microsoft Exchange 4.0 or something like that. I remember I went to the Exchange. It wasn't the Exchange conference. It was an Exchange gathering in Austin that same year. So this is 1996. And Elaine Sharp, who was the product manager for Exchange at the time, she came up to me in the grand auditorium of the conference center, and she announced to the whole world that I had rated her product. How dare I had written about Exchange without asking her. Elaine and I got on pretty well after that, and in fact we cooperated on a couple of books after that. But I had written a lot about Exchange, and I'd done books for Microsoft Press and all the rest of it. But the thing about writing paper books is that you end up with this horrible production cycle where you write a book, you finish it, you give it to copy editors, they tell you that your text is terrible and rewrite half of it. And, you go through this type of cycle, and eventually everybody settles on the final text. And then it goes into a printing cycle, and the printing cycle could take 6 weeks. And, by the time you see a book actually in your hands, the content is at least 3 months old. And in the world of Exchange or Windows Server or SharePoint Server, when you got a new release every 3 years, you got a new service pack every year, that was okay because you had lots of time to analyze the software and just get it done. But in the cloud, where things were happening at a pace that was unheard of on premises, it just didn't work. So I kind of sat down. I was in the south of France, actually, sitting having a coffee, and I said, maybe it was a kind of maybe the right thing to do would be to write a book that was always up to date. But then you have to think of how are you going to do this? And none of the major publishers were interested in this. Right. None of them. Microsoft Press wasn't interested. None of them were interested. Because all of their processes, all of their editorial processes, their production processes were built around having a fixed physical text.
Right.
So anyway, we decided, okay, well, let's self-publish. So I got together a team of MVPs, and we wrote this book called Office 365 for Exchange Professionals, because we all came out of the Exchange world. And Exchange at that time, you're talking about 2014 at this time.
Yeah.
All of the action in Office 365 was around Exchange.
Yeah, if you're deploying M365, it was because you wanted to move off all those Exchange servers on-prem. You want to move to the cloud. No one was saying, I want to enter ID and I'm going to go to the cloud.
No, it was Azure Active Directory at the time. But anyway, that's not important. The thing is, like, there weren't the migration facilities to move things like SharePoint. Well, there were, but they were terrible. And they weren't the kind of rich coexistence or rich migration that exists today. So anyway, we then went to the Exchange development group and said, hey, guess what? We got this book. Do you want to sponsor it? And they bought 500 copies of it, printed it.
Nice.
Printed it. There was no electronic distribution. Printed it, and we gave away those 500 copies at the Ignite conference in May 2015 in Chicago.
Nice.
And that was the start of it. At that stage, well, we just kicked into high gear, and we got to It took us a little while to figure out how to push out updates, how to manage our relationship with people who subscribe to the book, how to communicate with those folks and all the rest of it. But I think by about 2017, we were in the same kind of situation we're at today, where we publish a monthly update. When we say a monthly update, we mean a completely new book. We don't have this thing of publishing a list of changes and say, well, you got to go to page 362 and change it there. Or as you read the book, look at this list of changes and make sure that you use your brain to combine the two. We publish a completely updated book. And so last month, So probably this month, June the 1st, we published monthly update 120. So we have actually done 120 monthly updates. And we're heading into publishing the 2026 edition. And the reason why it's called the 2026 edition is that a couple of years ago, we decided to align with Microsoft's fiscal year. Microsoft starts its fiscal year 26 on July 1. So we publish Office 365 IT Pros 2026 edition on July 1, and that will be monthly update 121. And we'll start again, and we'll get to monthly update 132 in that edition. So you just get used to it every month. Oh gosh, do I have to publish? Yes, you do. And over that time, I think we've learned an awful lot about electronic publishing. We've learned a lot about how to generate different kinds of output. We've learned what people want. We've learned a lot about how to deal with various things like Amazon changing their book formats and whatever. It's just been a journey, and it's been fantastic. We learned ever so much. And the nice thing is that we have managed to capture a huge amount of information, a huge amount of knowledge from people who actually work with the products day in, day out. And whereas some, we're not perfect. We're definitely not perfect, but we do manage to capture that knowledge, and we do manage to communicate that knowledge. And that's what we've always tried to do. It's become a little bit more difficult now in the area of AI, because I think there's an expectation that people have that AI will deliver everything. And,
yes.
and AI is fantastic for retrieving information. It absolutely is fantastic for retrieving information. But so far, generative AI is not able to create new knowledge. And also, generative AI cannot give you context and cannot give you the whys things work in such a way. And I think also generative AI can't break down some of the stovepipes that exist inside places like Microsoft. And this is not a criticism of Microsoft. It's just an observation about how things work. Microsoft documentation, which people call official documentation.
Yes.
It's written by writers, and I noticed that Microsoft has laid off a lot of writers recently. But it's written by writers who are aligned with product groups, and they're aligned with features. So writers write about features. And they write about features in a little stovepipe. They don't think about how that feature links with 4 other features in the same product set, or how it impacts other products like Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, Teams, or whatever. And I think the advantage that books like ours have, and the writing that we try and do in blogs and stuff like that, is that we're thinking about how things work in the whole, practically.
Yes.
How it works when people actually have to use this stuff to get work done. So our attitude to writing is different to product documentation. And I think that's a really, really, really important thing to remember when people are saying, "Oh, AI, we'll just point to the Microsoft documentation, and we'll reason over that, and I'll get an answer." And I'll say, yeah, you'll get an answer, but the answer is limited to the knowledge that the writer had about a particular feature writing in a little stovepipe at that particular day. And have you seen, for example, you're a PowerShell guy. How many false, misleading, totally imaginary commandlets does Copilot generate? Oh my God, I don't know. It's something about commandlets, I think. But Copilot just cannot give you a straight answer when it comes to code. It's terrible.
Yes,
It's really terrible.
It'll imagine up commands that don't exist.
And then you say to it, "No, that's wrong. That command that doesn't exist," and it's very apologetic. I must say that it's got great manners. Copilot's got fantastic manners. Because, oh yes, thank you for pointing that out. Let me go and try again. It's like, why didn't you get it right the first time? You're freaking artificial intelligence, aren't you? So anyway, so things are getting a little bit, we always have these new challenges come along,
Yes.
We think of it, we solve the problems about book publication, we've solved the problem about communication with subscribers, we solved this, we solved that, and then we get a new problem to solve.
Yeah. That's the fun in tech.
That's life. You see, that's life. That's, that's the way things happen.
Nice, amazing.
You're just asking me to tell stories here, right? That's
Yes,
you're not
that's why we
asking
call
many
it the intro
questions.
chat. Yes. So one thing I really like about your writing. So for those who don't know, Tony is #1 on the Intra News newsletter for the last 100 issues. He's been the most prolifically featured
I'm not sure that's
author.
I'm not sure that's a measure of quality now.
It's,
Maybe a measure of quantity, but not quality.
so there is you wouldn't agree with me, but there is a quality bar to get on the newsletter. And you're always there, and like your PowerShell, a lot to do with PowerShell, and Graph PowerShell is a lot of the writing that's come across from Entra and so on. So
yeah, I'm only trying to fix the bugs. I'm only trying to fix the little holes the Microsoft leave thoughtfully. I love the way Microsoft engineering teams always leave these big holes in their products for us to fill with PowerShell. But anyway, that's another story.
That's the power of filling the gaps.
Yeah, power the gaps.
So what I really like about the way you write your articles is different, and I think that like I was sitting at the last the tech conference, you gave sort of a mini talk to a bunch of authors, and that's fascinating. And it was good to see like how you approach writing. And I know a lot of folks who are listening today as well. We have MVPs and others as well, folks who write a lot of content. And I feel there's a lot that you shared, which I found really insightful about how I should approach writing. Can you just share your the top few tips for people and the mistakes you see people as they write content, what you think they should avoid?
Okay. Well, thank you for putting me on the spot. I'd say the first and most important thing is to tell a story. So you can take an article and you can break it down into a story that you want to tell. So figure out what is that story. And a story always has a start, middle, and end. The start is an introduction, the middle is the technical content, the end is the conclusion. Always tell a story. That's the first and most important thing. The second thing, which I say to authors for websites like practical365.com, say, never leave your reader in any doubt what something is referring to. So words like it and this and they are terrible words in a technical description because they're not specific enough, right? You should always leave the reader in no doubt what you mean.
What's an example for that?
The third thing I'd say is like, if you're expressing an opinion, express it. Don't give me this kind of thing like a would, a could, maybe. It's like, if something works in the way it works, say it works in the way it works. Not that like on a cold, wet day in Maine in February when the temperature is under 10 degrees, the feature could work like this. No, the feature works, so, I mean, software is kind of like binary. So it either works or it doesn't. So tell people like that, exactly that. And the other thing I'd say is, and this is another very simple one, always be clear what the actor is. So something does something. Is it you? Is it a tenant administrator? Is it Microsoft? Is it the software? So just be very clear.
Yes, right.
And if you do that, if you tell a story, you're specific, you're emphatic, you always use the active tense, so you're not like, away in the fairyland or whatever, when 45 years ago when everything was brilliant. You're telling what it's like today. You're telling us about real information, which is factual, and that's the other thing. Always back things up. I mean, one of the things you may see in the articles we put out is that we're a great fan of hyperlinks. Okay, a hyperlink to an authoritative source is a fantastic thing for an article. It saves you having to repeat stuff that somebody else has already said. Why should you, if you find a great article that tells people the story about something that you want to mention in an article, don't go and write 100 words about what they've already done. Just put in a blooming hyperlink.
Build on top of it. Yeah.
It makes your text shorter, more concise, And it's more useful to the person who actually reads it because it's information rich. It's got lots of hyperlinks to everything. So I put in hyperlinks to other people's articles. I put hyperlinks to my articles, put hyperlinks to Microsoft Learn articles, whatever. It just saves me time and it makes that article better. So basic stuff is tell stories.
Yeah, I think
People
telling the story is
stories.
the important one. Like, I get a lot of submissions for the newsletter that I do, the weekly newsletter, and some I turn down, and then they ask like why. And a lot of the times it's the same as what's in the Microsoft Learn docs, and it's walking through the same thing, maybe adding a few screenshots, and that doesn't really tell a story because it's sort of the same as what's in the docs.
I think what you're pointing to there is really important. If an MVP or anybody else is writing about technology, they should be writing about it from their perspective, with their insight, instead of just replicating what some Microsoft program manager has written and published in the technical community or whatever. Just pushing out Microsoft authored text is a disservice to the technical community because it adds no value. It just creates multiple duplicated versions of the same stuff. And by the way, that same stuff may have errors.
Yes.
So I think if you're going to go, and because people make mistakes. I mean, God love us, a lot of Microsoft program managers couldn't write to save their mother. I tell
like
you,
me.
that's terrible.
Like
terrible.
me, that's why I stick to tweets.
Even though you guys all have Git or Copilot to help you, I mean, still can't write. So why go and take stuff that doesn't tell a story and just put it out there with a couple of pictures? That means nothing. And I see that all the time. And there are some websites that specialize in this. And it's awful. Whatever happens, tell your own version of the story. Give your insight. Find something that proves that you've actually used the software. That would be good too, you know, that you don't just put it out and you've never seen the software work. You know, if you're communicating to somebody about a subject, I mean, if you're trying to tell somebody how a car drives, okay, the reviewers actually get behind the wheel of the car and they drive the car. And then they can say, oh, you know what, it drifts into corners. Or, gee, the acceleration isn't very smooth around 40 kilometers an hour. They've actually done the work to get into the car, to start the car, drive the car, under different conditions, and they know how the car behaves. Same type of thing for technologists when they're writing about technology. If you don't use that technology and you don't find whether the technology works or it doesn't work, under what conditions it has problems, under what conditions it's absolutely brilliant, then all you're doing, with the greatest of respect, is just pushing out duplicated content in a vain attempt to get some page views, which you won't get anyway because of the way that the AI
that's
works
the next
today with
topic.
executive summaries and like.
Yes.
So what the hell? You're just wasting time. Stop it. MVPs, stop doing this because there's a lot of MVPs that do it. And sure, you can point to later on, I've got this list of articles I published during the year. Hey, how many of them were of any value? 10%? If you're lucky. 10? 15? Nah, you need to get up higher. You need to be at the 90% to be really a useful contributor to the tech community. Sorry. I'm very hard on this point.
Yes.
Well, I believe it. I read so much stuff. I mean, I'm like you. So one of my gigs is I'm the technical director for practical365.com. We get lots of submissions for articles. People want to publish all the time. And I read it. And the first question I ask myself, does this person understand the technology? Does the text show that they understand the technology? Second thing, have they actually read up about the technology? Because if they have, you'll see it. You'll see things like references to previous articles that we've written about the technology. You'll see references to what other people have written about the technology. You'll see some insight come through. Gosh, I remember I was looking at one the other day, an article about Power Platform, and it was written by an MVP, and it was so bad. And it was so bad because This person had basically taken content from 3 other sites, put them together in a different form of words, and pushed that out. Now, that type of stuff gets caught all the time. Why did you do that? Why didn't you just do the work of kind of like bringing through your view of the technology? Was your view exactly the same as the 3 people that you took from those other websites? Well, it's not. So why do that kind of thing? It's just terrible. Sorry. I get enthusiastic about this because it frustrates me so much, because I know that people are capable of doing better.
Yes, yeah, and that's one reason I wanted to bring you on, right? Like, we want to improve the content we create, and you mentioned something earlier when we were chatting about like, the content, like people go for page views.
Yes.
And you said it's not as important as good content.
Well, so the gods of SEO.
Yes.
And the way that Google in particular indexes and produces material today in search results mitigates against people who just go and duplicate stuff. There's a thing called domain authority. Every website has a domain authority number, which basically rates it as a source of authority. That's one thing. The second thing is that we got Google taking stuff from articles, putting it into its LLM, and generating executive summaries of material. And that's what you see on the top of the search results.
Yeah, when you search now, you just get the answer.
You just get
top,
you
right?
get an answer. Whether it's not the answer is a totally different thing, but you get an answer. And the point about that is that that's where people stop. An awful lot of people stop. I mean, there have been various studies done about this. And you can see that people will look at these executive summaries and they'll say, oh, there's an answer, grand, I'll take that. I'll never go to the source. I'll never query what the AI has done to extract from the source to formulate it and produce my answer. But I'll just accept that answer. And the net result of this is that page views or websites have been falling dramatically all across the world, right? And I suspect I've heard some mutterings outside of Microsoft that this is the same for Learn, and Learn is a huge website. It's actually interesting just looking in the Microsoft technical community, which is indexed, has a very high domain authority rating, so it means that anything that's found in the Microsoft technical community gets put up quite high on the list of answers generated by Google or Bing or whatever. But I noticed that the number of page views for articles in the tech community has been going down. You can tell this because you can just see the number of
because
views.
they include the page count.
They're going down and down and down.
Yeah.
They're, compared to what they were 5 years ago, they're a fraction. And this is the effect of executive summaries. It's the effect of AI absorbing all this information and pushing it out to users. And because this is happening, I'm saying to people that unless you can come to us, I'm now saying what happens for Practical 365, unless you can come to us with really good content that is unique, that exhibits huge insight about what a technology is actually doing and helps people to understand and optimize that technology to solve real world problems, I'm not interested. Because the rest of the stuff, telling people, here are the 4 parameters you can use with a PowerShell commandlet. I'm sorry, that's covered 82 times out there. Not interested. Not interested. But if you can tell me how I can use a commandlet to solve a problem that nobody else has solved, I'm all over it. That's new knowledge. That's important. But even that new knowledge, I now know within a month will be absorbed and will be in an LLM and will, become not so good knowledge anymore because everybody's got it. And for a website, that's terrible because that means that people won't come to your website to get that knowledge anymore.
That's the thing, right? Like, there are people who contribute a lot of the content, and a lot of folks do it because they just want to help others. But there are also people who put in that effort for creating the content, and this whole cycle of what's the point of creating content anymore if someone else benefits from all the work that you do.
Yeah, I don't mind that. I mean, but to answer that question, why do we do it? It is to help people, and it is to understand technology better. I mean, the thing about it is, look, Microsoft 365 is a very complicated ecosystem at this point. It really is. There are so many things that hang together. So if you're an average tenant admin, and I don't mean average in terms of like you're in the middle, of the league table of tenant admins, but if you're the average person who's a bit stressed, got lots of work to do, trying to take care of Entra ID, trying to take care of Exchange, Teams, SharePoint, etc., like that. Your job is a lot easier if you understand the technology. But you're not going to understand the technology by reading documentation, official documentation. You'll understand what a feature does from reading the official documentation. You won't understand how it works in the real world. I think the focus and the mission for people like me is to try and explain how that technology really works in the real world. And that's to help people get stuff done. The beginning and end of it, you strip it all away. It's helping people get stuff done. Helping people simplify, understand, comprehend, utilize, exploit this tremendously complicated ecosystem.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing. At least that's what we're trying to do. And we get it right sometimes and we get it wrong to others.
Yes. Cool. So coming to our favorite topic, Graph PowerShell. You're a huge PowerShell fan. You do this PowerShell face-off, or what's it called? The tech conference.
Oh, at the tech conference, the experts conference. We have this competition called the PowerShell face-off, where we give people challenges that they've got to solve on stage in 20 minutes, and I mean, it's all just a bit of fun. But yeah, I am a fan. Jeffrey Snover and I, Jeffrey, who was the inventor of PowerShell, Jeffrey and I worked in digital together.
Yes, yeah, he's from tech.
Yeah, and I actually worked with his wife more closely. But that was in some projects in digital. So I knew Jeffrey well all the way up, and when he published the Monad manifesto way back, 2005 or thereabouts, I was really, really, really interested. And of course, I was an Exchange guy. Yeah. And Exchange Server 2007 was the first major Microsoft server product to embrace PowerShell. And they did it with a very pragmatic view, because they wanted to get away from an old style administrative framework that they had for Exchange 2003. And they said, okay, we're going to do something different. They said, well, let's build everything on PowerShell. So Exchange was built everything on PowerShell. All the admin interfaces had PowerShell commandos behind it, which is fantastic. It was a great illustration of the power of PowerShell, if you will. And in fact, a lot of the early Office 365 admin was built around PowerShell as well. You talk to people like Vivek Sharma, who was very deeply involved in that kind of stuff at the time. He's now at Stripe. He's a very senior vice president of Stripe. It's amazing where people end up. But, some of the stuff that they were doing with PowerShell was absolutely incredible. You asked me there about the graph. I will first say that I am a hacker, yes. But I'm a hacker in a noble sense, not an attacker. Yeah. I hack because I'm not a very good programmer. Never was. My good days of programming go back to VAX COBOL, and that doesn't really go too far with PowerShell these days. But I really enjoy taking time to understand a problem and to try and get a solution with PowerShell. And one of the things I like about Graph PowerShell is that it gives me so much access to Microsoft 365 data. And that's the lovely thing about it. The bad thing about it is that it's an intensely frustrating interface to work with.
Yes.
The theory behind Graph PowerShell is fantastic. Let's take the the open doc specifications for all of the Graph APIs. Let's run it through this auto rest process and let's spit out modules and commandlets on the other side. Yeah, but human beings are fallible, and some of those open doc specifications aren't exactly brilliant. So you end up with metadata that's flawed and whatever. And I think it's just become so complicated now. I mean, you're talking about, I think, between the V10 and beta versions of the Graph PowerShell SDK,
API.
you're talking about 35,000 commandlets.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. But I also think that Microsoft has, I'm searching for the right words here. I think the engineers working on it were doing exactly the right thing, but there was a lack of maybe senior leadership guidance for the PowerShell SDK, which led people to make bad decisions. And you ended up with over the last couple of years, a number of very bad, flawed releases. Most notably recently in V2.26, 2.6.26.1, 2.27. Excuse me. You also ended up with a situation where across Microsoft 365, the various teams who produce PowerShell do not work together. And they don't work with other people inside the ecosystem. So, this whole thing of turning off support for .NET 6 just because it seemed like a good thing to do has afflicted the ability of the Graph PowerShell SDK and the Exchange Online Management module to run on Azure Automation. And guess what? When stuff goes on Azure Automation, it's typically stuff that's really important. This is your most important stuff. You want it to run in a reliable, stable platform. Hey, Azure Automation seems to be a good thing. It's got great scheduling, et cetera, et cetera. Microsoft takes care of it. It's got managed identity, so it's awfully secure, much, much more secure than using Windows Task Scheduler, et cetera. And I'm paying more to run it because I pay for the scripts with an Azure subscription. Okay, sounds good. But then Microsoft goes and blows up two really important PowerShell commandlets. That's just bad. An indictment of the leadership around PowerShell in the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. It's a thing, every time I get a chance to talk to senior leaders inside the whole structure, and a lot of them are people who I worked with in the past in various roles lower down the food chain, if you like, I keep on saying to them, guys, you've really got to do a better job here. You got to get coordination. You got to get people to talk together. You got to make sure that the Graph SDK, Teams, SharePoint, Exchange, and Azure,
the modules,
they all work together solidly. And you can give a guarantee that nothing's going to go wrong. You're not going to get silly assembly clashes. You're not going to get Azure Automation run jobs barfing as soon as they start off just because, something's been taken away. That's got to stop because there's been too much disruption. We had this terrible disruption around Azure AD and MSOL, getting rid of those modules. Right thing to do. But boy, was that project badly handled. From communication perspective, from tooling. For the world's largest software company, sometimes you guys do a really bad job of managing this stuff. You didn't expect me to get, when you asked me to come on here, you didn't expect me to say,
but everyone loves Azure AD PowerShell. It's very hard to replace it, but it was always falling behind. That's the whole thing with PowerShell and the API surface, because it's all like you talked about with your book, right? It's always changing. And if you were manually writing the code, you always keep falling behind.
Yes.
And that's the challenge that Azure AD PowerShell module had. It was always at least 3-6 months, and the gap kept getting bigger and bigger. And Graph PowerShell was a good idea to give that, and it's really good. But
Miro, the concept is wonderful. You cannot criticize the concept. It's fantastic. It's just been afflicted by quality problems. At the end of the day, it comes back to human beings. The software that generates all this stuff does exactly what it's told. It's just unfortunate that the human beings who created the input, that's flawed. And I mean, you see the same thing with Copilot or ChatGPT as well. If you provide these top of the range tools which are running on massively powered data centers, if you produce rubbish and you give them rubbish to process, what are they going to produce? Rubbish. And we've seen that with some deployments of Microsoft 365 Copilot, where people have just woken up and said, oh my God, the amount of rubbish we have stored in SharePoint and OneDrive. Oh my God. You got documents that are bad, documents that contain incorrect information, obsolete information. Copilot doesn't know the difference. It just sees words.
Indexes.
It absorbs the words and spits out the words. Hey, so.
But that's when people have, they're figuring out, right? Like, oh, it's actually something we have, a document that's out of date, but it's still there, and we haven't done the work of, reviewing the docs and archiving
I mean, it strikes me, we're always told, and it's been this case since the start of email, that you're told, always think about what you send, because you never know when that message could be taken out and used. Now, in those days, it was kind of like, okay, it could be used, I don't know, in an e-discovery case or whatever, when you prove something. I'm thinking, I mean, this goes back even to the things like Colonel Oliver North and the Contras, on an IBM Profs system, a long, long time ago. But now it's a case of, if you don't put absolutely perfect stuff in an email or a Teams message and you send it off, well, 3 years later, Copilot could come wandering along and say, oh, here's some interesting information. I'll take that and I'll use that in my output. So, this is just part of what we got to live with now in the world where AI tools are taking this information, absorbing this information, using this information. And as a technical community, we have to figure out how to really refine what that output is going to be, so it's the best ever it can be. It's interesting. It's taken Microsoft fully 2 years to come up with tools that limit the ability of Copilot to take stuff out of SharePoint. You got things like restricted content discovery. You got things like the DLP policy for SharePoint. You got sensitivity labels and stuff like that. But it's taken a long time. We're 2 years, 2.5 years nearly down the Copilot path. And it's only now that we're getting to a point where stuff is under control a little bit. And now the next challenge has come along with agents. This proliferation of agents, which could, if they're not controlled, run amok inside Microsoft 365. Now, that's a very colorful phrase. I mean, it's not like, it's not like Terminator and the agents are running amok, shooting people. It's not like that at all. But I'm just thinking about what's the state of governance here? What do we know? Do we know what these agents are doing and who's running them and whatever, and what the life cycle is going to be and the compliance stuff? It just takes time to get these frameworks around what's happening. Anyway, that's a long way away from the Graph SDK. I realize that, but you can see how my mind wanders a little bit.
But agents is a thing where, like, it might not be visible yet to people, but internally at Microsoft, it's all agents that's happening. Like, we are talking, building, breathing, sleeping, waking up, thinking about agents, and like, how do you manage the agents? How do you working on the new standards? How do agents talk to each other, the different protocols? There's so much happening right now in that space. And it's exposing a lot of things. For example, permissions, granular permissions, like with Graph. Today, you have these very coarse-grained permissions that you give. It's either read all or read write all, and there's no medium in between. And people
there's some, I mean, user read up basic or whatever,
Correct. And SharePoint selected sites, and Exchange have the access policy. But how do you do things like just give an agent access for like a period of time? Like, why should the agent have access to, if you want to do something with your photos, why should it have permanent access to your photos? I just want to give it access for this 1 hour to go through the pictures that I have now to do something. and like how do we bring those here? So we published sort of a white paper to get the community, because we need to, it's not something that only Microsoft can do. There are standards we need to build so that we all work together in the ecosystem, because agents are not just being built at Microsoft. It's the whole industry is building agents, and how do you manage them?
Well, it was kind of interesting listening to some of your Microsoft IT people talking about the controls that exist at Microsoft about how agents can be used. It strikes me that Microsoft takes a far more restrictive attitude towards use of agents in its own infrastructure than it perhaps advocates to customers.
It depends on Microsoft IT decide what they do in different places. So,
well, they have an advantage. You see, they're probably 6 months to 12 months ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
In terms, because of the relationship they have with engineering groups, in terms of understanding how these things could happen, but or what consequences could flow from a bad deployment. But what I fear about is that you have got evangelists out there who are bashing the drum for makers to create new agents to solve all these problems. These citizen developers and whatnot. I'm saying, okay, guys, that could be okay in a situation where you have a framework, where you can control them, where you have permission, where you understand what's going on. But I don't know if many organizations are mature enough yet to have this. And that is a problem I think we're going to have to face up with. And I think if there's one mistake I see Microsoft making time and time and time again, it is this rush to deploy a new technology without guardrails, okay? And then we end up cleaning up the mess for the next 20 years. It happened with Exchange Server 4.0 and public folders. There are still people today with gigabytes of information in public folders. We're trying to get rid of those damn cockroaches.
Yeah, I've been on a project where we had to get rid of the public folders.
Okay, but again, the decision was made in 1996 that anybody could create a public folder. The next thing is you get unmitigated disaster. Same type of thing happened in 2014 with Office 365 groups. Anybody can create an Office 365 group, and they can. And by the way, they get the SharePoint site as well. Okay, and then that was under control a little bit until Teams came along. Everybody can create a team.
Yes.
And now the next thing you turn around, you got 320 million Teams users around the world, and you've got God knows how many teams. And the problem is that you've got not everybody has got a group expiration policy because they don't have the necessary licenses. So you just got a whole pile of stagnant stuff there. And even if they have got the expiration policy, is anybody paying attention to it? And the consequences of having all of this information build up in these SharePoint sites that belong to these stagnant teams is that the information in SharePoint is equally stagnant. And of course, it's available to Copilot. So you end up with really horrible stuff going out. So I could just see, if agents are introduced into an organization and they're let proliferate without really strict guardrails, we're going to have to clean up a big mess in a number of years.
I'm sure the agents will build an agent that will go clean it up. Yes, see?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. The agents will talk to each other and say, oh, are you in use? No, I'm not in use. Oh, well, I'm going to have to suppress you.
Yeah.
Agents killing agents. Is that going to be as long as I have a commandlet to do it, I guess I'll be okay.
Yes, yeah, you'll be able to manage
agent, kill dash unused agent. Yes, I'll have that one. Thanks. You give me a Graph API for that?
Absolutely. Graph is going to be there. Then we have conditional access. So
conditional access will kill all these agents.
To control them, at least.
Well, seriously, I mean, there's work to be done there. There is.
It's an exciting time.
It is.
For we are living through this. I say I'm lucky, and you would say too, right? Like the whole computer generation of we lived in a world before there were PCs and before there was the
Well, you
internet.
know what? We always think that when we're dealing with the technology today, we always think that we're lucky and it's so difficult, whatever. I mean, when Windows 95 was launched, we thought, oh my God, this is a
Yes.
huge advance. Windows 2000 came along, huge advance and whatever. It's like, and then we had the secure by default and all that sort of stuff when
Trustworthy computing. Yes.
Windows 2003 didn't work so well. That's just, technology just goes in waves. One of the great things about technology, it keeps giving us opportunities to tell new stories.
Yes. Yeah. For me, the way I see it is like a pendulum, and like it needs to happen because something new comes along. Everyone wants to experiment, create. So the pendulum swings one way of let's break the shackles and just let's go try things, and then it's all well and good, and then the bad guys find out what they can do, and the pendulum then swings the other way about let's lock it down, secure it. It happened
but
with
I'm
even
going to
the
ask
phone.
you here, what shackles are we breaking exactly?
Like it happens with the phones, right? Like the PCs were all getting locked down, and then the iPhone came along, and now you can do things in that, and the whole BYOD thing came out of that, where you're not managing it.
That was great. Yeah, that was great.
You could just get email and everything on the phone. It worked so well. So it just moves between like these like once you've been in IT for a while, you see these swings. And as an IT admin, that's one thing I've learned because you don't get funding all the time, right? But you do get funding when either something new technology
Goes
comes
wrong.
or something goes wrong, then you you get the funding to fix things. So you just need to be prepared to make the most of, when someone comes and says, okay, how do you fix all this? And then you have this list you've made of, you're prepared.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that the iPhone is the reason why Intune exists, huh?
It's a string. It's just the string that goes both ways.
Because of course, like when the iTunes first came out, or the iPhone first came out in 2007, it was only executives who got them, and they were the ones that broke all of the rules in terms of
I just
allowing
wanted
email
to work
on an insecure device. It wasn't a BlackBerry. So I don't know. That's an example once again of people breaking rules to get technology.
Yeah, and that's just going to keep happening, and you'll find ways to manage it.
Yeah, have we found a way to do that, to manage that yet? Manage senior executives, I mean.
No.
I don't know. So I'm struggling with that one.
Awesome. It's been such a good chat, Tony. I can't believe we've crossed 1 hour already.
Oh my God. Yeah. I suppose I better go and do some work. I've got a book to get out next week.
Nice. Looking forward to your book. And you also have the PowerShell book as well, right?
Automating Microsoft 365 with PowerShell. Yeah, we're doing a major revamp of that. I mean, the book came out of a chapter that used to be in the main book. The chapter was a 90-page chapter, and now the book is a 350-page book.
Nice. Amazing.
Yeah. Well, yeah. There's just so much to talk about in terms of automating stuff, and in terms of and the great thing is that I said that there were some bad words about the Graph PowerShell SDK earlier. The really great thing about the Graph SDK is that it opens up so many possibilities to solve problems.
It's just your imagination. It's only your imagination.
It does. You've just got to do a little bit. It's not like PowerShell, but it is like PowerShell. It's got its own quirks. But I think any Microsoft 365 admin can use the Graph PowerShell SDK. It just takes a little bit of a stretch. And then when they do, my gosh, the stuff you can do with that is just incredible.
Yes, it's crazy what people are doing now with the power of AI and PowerShell and the things they're building, like the dashboards and the reports and the automations. It's really cool, all the stuff that they're doing. So
Yeah.
yes, it's an
I
exciting.
suspect GitHub has a lot to GitHub Copilot, which, by the way, is one of the best AI implementations ever. I suspect that's got a lot to do, but even it gets things wrong too. I mean, it
Yeah,
suggests
it's.
it
I mean, it's
suggests
still early
commandlets
days.
that don't exist either. You know, but
Cool.
anyway,
And your
it's
book,
well worth the
yeah, for
$10 a month.
yes, for admins, it's and how do they get your book? Because for me, what I come across is for most of Entra admins or the security folks, they're just starting to understand how, like, there are all these security things we need to be concerned about, not just with Exchange, and there's Teams, and then there's Power
Yeah.
Apps, and then people can write
Mhm.
Power Automate, which can do things and send data off or bring data in. So there's this whole surface area in M365 that even though if you're just still doing Entra, it's at the center of all of these other things, and you need to be at least across those. And your book is sort of a really awesome resource that ties all of that together.
Thank you for saying. I agree with you. I think every tenant admin needs to be across Entra in a big way, in a much more in-depth way than they were with Active Directory in the past. If they thought Active Directory Entra it's the same, it's not. There's so much more complications, but there's stuff there that can be exploited that could never be exploited in Active Directory, and that's the joy of it. So you asked where to get the book. You can go to our website, office365itpros.com. There's plenty of direction there, or just go to gumroad.com and you can buy the book there. The PowerShell book is actually available as a paperback.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, some people decided, they came to me and said, this PowerShell book, terribly difficult to follow electronically. And I'm looking at them saying, like, you follow everything else electronically. What's wrong? So no, we need a printed copy. So okay, so it was an opportunity. It's like one of those things I was talking about earlier on, an opportunity to learn about stuff. So we learned about how to produce Amazon print-on-demand paperbacks. So it's available as an Amazon print-on-demand paperback. The only thing about it is, for the paperback, we have no ways of updating it. There isn't a way yet.
Yeah.
AI
Once
hasn't
it's
told
out,
us
it's
yet
out. Yes.
how to patch paper copies of books that have been dispatched to the four corners of the world. So I'm sorry, if you buy a paperback, that's it. It's just like buying any other paperback. What's in it is in it.
Keep buying a new version every year.
Yeah, or every month.
Yes. Cool. I'll add the links in the show notes as well
Thank you.
for folks
Thank
to
you.
get the book.
Thank
you so much, Tony. It's been so cool to hear all the stories and all the Microsoft improvements that can be made and insights.
I just keep on telling people. Sometimes they'll take notice. Most of the time they don't. I'm very ignorable.
But the more noise you make, the
less people listen.
Hear about it.
Anyway,
Cool.
thanks
Thank
for
you so much,
chatting. It was
Tony.
great fun.